noticed your job title is head librarian and professor of women's studies.
Yes.
It sounds like you wear multiple hats. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, I do. I think, as probably most academic librarians do, a little bit of everything. I'm fortunate in that I do have that appointment in the Women's Studies program at Penn State. And while I haven't recently, because of the various ALA things that I've been doing, done as much in terms of courses, I have worked with some students who are interested in women's studies. I've done some independent studies with students. But I'm also the head of the library at the campus where I'm at, the Greater Allegheny campus. Penn State has about 24 campuses all across the Commonwealth. We're 13 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, so that's why I'm working sort of in that area, but I'm the head of the library at that campus and work with the students there who are either earning their degrees at that campus or maybe go on to other campuses and everyday operations for the library.
Well, you kind of anticipated my next question. I was going to ask you about your library.
Yes.
You serve collections and all that stuff.
Yes. We've developed the collections that are, since we're one university geographically distributed, we're one university library geographically distributed. So we also are building collections, not just for the ones that are housed physically in our building, but also the collections that are across the Commonwealth. So we're sharing those materials, even if they start at our campus and maybe end up at another campus, providing the instruction services that students need who are taking classes at the campus, as well as supporting the faculty that are there as well in terms of their research and service.
So do each of the sort of branches have their own collection development budget, or is it done at the main campus and sort of distributed out to the campuses?
It's complicated because we're one sort of organization.
We're one entity.
Yes. So certainly each library does have a collections budget that they work within, but for example, for electronic resources, those materials are all funded centrally, and so in a way we contribute to that access, and all of our electronic resources are accessible to any Penn State student, staff, faculty member at any location through obviously things like IP authentication. So we really do a lot of collaborative purchases as well for our budgets. We talk about print and electronic resources. So there's a lot of collaboration that takes place, it's interesting because if we were sort of true branches, then, sort of administratively would be singular. But since we are one organization, it's a little more fluid than that.
It sounds complicated.
It is
tricky.
It is complicated and complex, but it does works. It really, I mentioned in my, keynote that libraries and librarians are very good at collaborating, and if we weren't, this model would not have worked for as long as it has. So it's good. I know all my colleagues across the Commonwealth.
Oh, that's fabulous.
We work together. We really do. In terms of the one university model, I think the libraries are a model unit within the organization of how you can work together effectively, collaboratively across space and time.
As you were saying that, I was thinking that the library tradition of collaboration and interlibrary loaning and so on is really paying off.
Yeah, for our students, for our students and faculty, it absolutely pays off. Something can be, in the Philadelphia area, and a student here in the Pittsburgh area needs it. In a couple of days, they've got it in their hands. Or if it's electronic, we're moving to having access to full text materials more and more, so they're able to really get whatever they need. Nothing's never more than a couple of days away.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your tenure as ALA president.
Yes.
So you just finished.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of being the leader of the largest library association in the world?
The largest library association.
And if you could sort of pinpoint one or two major takeaways from the experience that you had.
Only one or two.
We don't have all time.
I know. It was a tremendous honor, obviously, to serve as ALA president. really an amazing year. The takeaways, I think if I had to nail it down just to two major takeaways, would be that, I mean, this is just a tremendous profession, and it's really an honor to be associated with people who work so hard to make sure that people have access to the information that they need, and that really applies to anyone. People are really working hard to preserve the right for whomever to come into the libraries and use them and get what they need is pretty amazing. The other major takeaway is that I have developed a really strong appreciation for the work of my colleagues in other types of libraries. My day-to-day work. Since I started in the profession, I've been an academic librarian, which is great, but I have really come to understand how vitally important the work of my colleagues who are, teen and youth services librarians in public libraries, or school librarians, or the special librarians I know who work in industry, how their work connects to the work that I do and makes me better as a librarian, and that we really all need to have an understanding and appreciation of the work that not just the people who do the kind of work that we do, but also an appreciation and understanding of the work that people who do things that are very different from what we do, because they are connected when it comes to those advocacy pieces. It is connected when we're talking about, equity, diversity, inclusion. It is connected when we're talking about challenges with funding. I just have really come to appreciate it, and under the umbrella of ALA, because oftentimes people say ALA is too big, it's too complicated. I really just need this one little piece of it, but that piece of it is where you can really sort of interact and do your best work and get those best practices and those practical pieces, which I think are incredibly important. But it's also great to be able to be proud of and have an understanding that we're doing this in concert in sort of a larger context, and that even if you aren't yourself maybe touching that piece, it's still, there are people who are championing that and allowing you to, be a part of a really incredible profession. Those are sort of be the first two pieces. Of course, there are more.
So I'm just curious, kind of practical speaking.
Yes.
How did it fit into, how were you able to do your job as head of your library and be ALA president? I think most people probably have no idea what the time commitment is and what it involves. I mean, were you just flitting across the country at one meeting after next and sort of left somebody else in charge at your library, or sort of like the practical speaking of the year of being ALA president? What was it like?
It was a lot of work because, the position description for ALA president says, to consider it at least to be like a half-time position.
Oh,
it's really
it's a full-time. It's full of 1.5 times.
Exactly,
probably, right?
with no salary.
Yeah, right.
So, it's a great question because there aren't a lot of models for how to do this if you were still very much front line and working full-time. A number of ALA presidents had either recently retired or were intending to retire when they became president. I'm not going to be retiring anytime soon, but it starts with your institution, and so the dean of my library, Barbara Dewey, without her support, I would not have been able to even consider doing it, and I had her support, and every day I'm appreciative that she allowed me to have this opportunity. The complexities of Penn State that we've already kind of talked about, I think, really lend themselves to how it was able to work, because ALA is complex, and Penn State's also complex, and so that made some things actually not seem complicated because, this in ALA fits in the way that we do this.
Sort of used to the workflow kind of thing. Yes.
And so because we're one university geographically distributed, we're accustomed to doing things in different ways. By streaming things, you do a lot of things via email, you do a lot of phone calls. You don't get as much sort of face-to-face time. So my being away from the library wasn't necessarily different. It was maybe at times for longer periods of time, but it still fit into the workflow of us doing things electronically. I always say to my staff, even if I'm just going to a conference for a few days, if something really happens, you could call me. Certainly
sure,
don't feel that you
right.
can't do that. So we did that in the same way. It also gave my staff an opportunity to do more, to sort of make some decisions, and knowing that I would support them, because they didn't always feel, well, we sort of wait around until Courtney gets back to act
So they
on
were
this.
empowered
They were
to-
empowered, and I was really excited to give them that opportunity to say, you're going to make decisions. I'm going to support you. If there's something that we need to adjust on the back end, we'll do that, but you're in these roles because you're the best qualified person for this job, and my job, even if I'm here physically in the building, is to support you in that work. So even if I'm not here, I'm still going to support you in the same way. So I think that it worked out really well, and I'm really proud of the work that my staff did.
That's great. So do you think that they will feel empowered to still be empowered, even though you're in the
I hope
building?
so. I hope so.
Courtney's here now. We're going to rely on her for everything, for all the decisions now.
Well, in certain areas, there are things that they know better now than I do.
that's
So
great.
I'm
Yeah,
looking
that's
to
great.
them for, how did we deal with this last time? Do you think that makes sense now? If there's one little thing maybe I can ask about for clarification, but, I
that's
think
great.
that's the goal. We've all changed as a part of this process, and I have to, appreciate the ways in which they've
Sounds
changed.
like it's been a growing experience for
I think
everybody.
so, yeah. I really think so.
Great. So in your talk this morning, you discussed how the experience of being ALA president changed the way you approach key concerns for libraries, how they can demonstrate their continuing value to the communities. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I framed it in terms of advocacy, partnerships, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The thing about when you're ALA president and you travel, people want to see, they want to show you their libraries. They want you to see what they're doing and what's going on. And as I said earlier, this sort of idea that what's going on in terms of ALA and libraries, it seems very broad and far away, and it doesn't really connect to what I'm doing. It was really nice for me to sort of take a step back and reflect on this year where I've been, this sort of frontline advocate for libraries,
Right.
and, the person, who, you attend these meetings and talk to these partners, and, going to the FCC to talk to them about broadband
Wow.
and that sort of thing, and thinking about, well, how does this really connect to what I'm doing, and why is this important in the work that I do, and how can I get the average member to really sort of understand and appreciate why this is important. And it was great to be able to kind of step back and say there is a connection between what I do in, at a small campus, southeast, 13 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. And advocacy is really something that's important. The sort of national advocacy, component is important, because what we're doing with students is trying to prepare them for the world. We want them to be, these fantastic global citizens that are going to do amazing things, and certainly some of that advocacy piece should trickle down into that. They're going to move forward, they're going to the workforce. They may work for organizations where this is something that's very important, and we want to sort of have that as a part of what they're doing. I want them particularly in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to be people who are open-minded and approach the world as not necessarily, this big scary world out there, but to approach it with real intellectual curiosity. Some of our students, they come to our campuses, and it's the first time that they're really presented with any kind of diversity. And the spaces where that can kind of really take place comfortably, I realize, is in the library. Because if they're not in class, oftentimes they're in our building, and there's a real opportunity, I think, there. And so it's important that I have an understanding and a connectedness to that, and really sort of move some things forward. I think that we can do that, particularly in academic libraries, public libraries as well, school libraries, but I really think that as sort of the last line of defense almost in our academic libraries, that it's really like, this is really when they're pushing away. This is when the training wheels hopefully really do fall off once they walk across that stage. And, what have we done to advocate for that space be theirs? What have we done to advocate that the materials they need are in the collection and are well funded, that they recognize it as a safe space? What can we really do that allows that to be a reality? Another piece with regards to partnerships that I realized, I think we feel that, we have sort of natural partners on campus and we just have groups that we work with. Visiting different types of libraries and talking about people who do work very different from what I do really demonstrated to me that, hey, I'm having these conversations with academic affairs or student affairs, but I've never asked them that question, or I've never thought about partnering with them in that way. And what would it open up if I actually asked this question differently in terms of, the invitation to go to student orientation? We show up, we have our handouts and our brochures, and we really want to, but maybe they really could use support from the library in a different way that isn't so driven by, as the second keynote that we heard this morning talked about, the ID card is how they check out materials and authentication, so on and so forth. Maybe there are other things that we could be contributing to that process that would better support our students, because that's our goal. And I hadn't thought about it in quite that way. So it's kind of it's fun, it's exciting, it's very really and talking to people about it, and they go, they think, it's just all sort of ALA policy and and this, that, and the other, but that it really could have sort of real world application, that it really could, allow you to do something a little bit different. It's pretty exciting.
Well, speaking, you mentioned real world application, and I'm thinking about demonstrating value. And I wonder how librarians, and this would be on a local level in your individual library, how the librarian can really show return on investment and the value of the library to the administration, and really point out to them, it's really worth contributing X number of dollars to library services in the library.
Right. That's the $1 million question. Currently, we're very fortunate in that our interim chancellor at the campus is someone who has a library degree. She's a librarian, and so it's not every person's going to be that fortunate in that their administrator is going to be someone who understands the work that you do and the goals that you have. But it certainly is helping right now for us, because the library building has never been renovated, and the building was built in '72. So now, one of my goals since I got there was to advocate for renovation for that building, and we're certainly making a lot of progress in identifying how that space could be better used, what opportunities are there for funding that renovation, and the impact that we know that it's going to have. It's fortunate in that there have been renovations at other locations, and so we have numbers in terms of the number of people who are coming in, the ways in which faculty are changing their assignments to take advantage of the resources that are available. And so I'm really, that's where, advocating with faculty is coming into play, because we're getting new faculty who are coming in who really want to implement different type of assignments and have their students try some different type of coursework. There's certainly more focus on group work, for example. And so by starting to build those relationships with those faculty and talk to them and say, we could do this, so we could incorporate a one-button studio so that students could do presentations and learn how to sort of hone those skills, and we could have that in the library as they do in other locations. That really has really helped with interest, and so administrators see that there is application not just beyond students having a pretty space to be in, but it is going to have an impact on the coursework, and which hopefully then also has an effect on accreditation. Where we are would be Middle States accreditation, but also there's a component in that we have we have advisory boards, and so those advisory boards are people in the community who know what they're looking for in those graduates and what it's going to allow them to be successful. And they're saying, our students need to come out with certain types of skills. Having experienced these things, we don't have time to ramp them up, but it would be great if they were coming out knowing how to do these things. And we can talk about, the library is a great space, a great place, great opportunity to get students to develop those skills so that they're ready to go right into the workforce. And, our advisory board members are able to hire them and then talk about how great it is to hire Penn State students because they're coming out, with these skills, and then that gets picked up in the press, and then there's that return on investment, and then suddenly it seems incredibly affordable to really commit funds to the library and supporting some of its development, because then we have these alumni who are doing amazing things and giving back to the institution.
And a lot of things you're talking about are a bit above and beyond the traditional notions of what libraries do.
Right.
And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, I know back in 2011 you were named a mover and shaker.
Yes.
And at that time you were lauded as a master of making connections.
Yes.
And I was wondering, what do you think are the most essential connections for the library to make on campus?
The most essential. There's, I think the library should have a connection to pretty much every unit on campus, whether it's, office of physical plan and facilities in terms of making sure that the building, is well maintained and, the temperatures that students want it to be at, and the collections are protected, academic affairs, of course, makes a lot of sense because of the kinds of things we're doing to develop the collections in support of, course delivery, library instruction, our reference services, both there in the building, also virtual. Student affairs, I think, is one that I think is growing. I think that there is even more opportunity because I think it's, as I said, it's not just sort of being invited to the, new student orientation or the student fairs. There are different things that we can do at those events, but I think that making stronger connections with our student affairs staff, because I think we see students a lot more than some faculty do, academic advisors do, some of the people who are in student housing. I think we see students more. We're able to build relationships with students in a slightly different way because we're not the ones we're not giving them a grade, although in some cases there are courses where we are, but for the most part we're not giving them a grade. We're not necessarily policing them in terms of quiet hours in the dorm or that sort of thing. So students come to us, with that combination of social, but also educational. And so we're able to build relationships with them and get a sense and understand, particularly when there are challenges that students are faced with, that they'll articulate it to us. They'll come in and they'll say, I need to register for classes. So I'm using a computer in the library to do that, but then you start to have these conversations and you discover that these students who are full-time are taking full course load. They're working maybe 30 or more hours a week, and they're helping to take care of a younger sibling or something like that. And we understand why, okay, this is why students are taking these courses, but they don't recognize that they're not matriculating as they need to be. They're not going to talk to their advisor because they don't really know who that person is, and maybe they feel like they're not comfortable, and so they talk to us. And so we in the library, I think, have to really really work to have an understanding of the entire campus and what's going on. Even with police services or parking services, why students are avoiding coming to campus, or they're hiding out because they're not paying parking tickets or what have you, and getting them to sort of really understand. I mean, we almost get to be mentors to students, and not just for mentored course instruction, but for really mentor in terms of understanding the next 4 or 5 years on campus, and and so that they can do it effectively, and being able to tell a student to go specifically talk to a particular person in a particular department, that it's a reference. For me, it's a reference librarian sort of thing, instead of saying, oh, you need to go over to academic affairs. But if I can say, oh, you should go talk to Donna in academic affairs, then they might actually do it. So it's a lot of juggling, it's a lot of hats, as you mentioned, but I think it's really important, because just like every other unit on that campus, we want our students to be successful. We want them to graduate in timely fashion with a degree, in a major that they can see themselves in.
I think that you mentioned the librarian interaction with students is an undervalued resource, and I don't think librarians promote it enough, and I'm not sure that administrators recognize that's a real resource.
Yeah, I think we need more. I think in our professional literature, we need more administrators, librarians who recognize and appreciate that strength, and we need more also administrators outside of the library to recognize that we bring a lot of expertise to our role in the library. And this isn't just something that your outreach librarian or your instruction librarian should do. Librarians and other parts of the library, special collections, technical services, and acquisitions and cataloging also should be, sharing their expertise as well with our students, and really being, an ambassador for the library and for the college or university.
And it sounds like you're actively doing this at Penn State Greater Allegheny.
It's certainly my goal. Yes. It's something that I enjoy doing, and I really I see a need for. And I also think that for me in particular, our students, particular students of color, don't see a lot of people of color in administrative roles, or maybe not a lot of faculty, and so I've recognized that it's also a real opportunity to connect with students who maybe don't see themselves reflected in other parts of the campus. And so I have a real obligation to support those students, as well as other students who feel that they are in some way a little bit different from everyone else. So it's
that role model.
Yes, yeah. That was one of those things that I had no idea coming into this profession that I would ever be in that position. But now I've recognized it. I take it very seriously, and it's a real privilege.
So that leads to my next question, which is one of the key themes of your ALA presidency was fostering diversity.
Yes.
So how do you think, any one particular library can help do that, foster diversity on its campus?
I think there are a number of ways to do it. I mean, we think about our collections, for example, and hopefully we're building diverse collections that support the disciplines, but also some other areas. And so I think making people aware of how diverse and rich our collections are is certainly one piece of that. Having librarians and staff, or even the whole library, designated as a safe space, particularly for students who, in terms of sexual orientation or gender identity, know that they can come in and be safe in that space, but also talk to people who can connect them with the network if they need support, is also really important. I think that in terms of the campus administration as well, that make sure that those dialogues take place, and You're going to, I mean, one of the questions this morning, someone said, I'm not going to say that I don't support diversity. And, certainly
right,
people are not going
right.
to
No,
say
they're
that.
not gonna come out
I'm
and
not,
say,
I'm not in support
I don't believe in that.
of diversity. Yeah. I don't have time for that. And so I think that there are opportunities to really garner support for diversity at that broader level on campus. I think a lot of institutions, either on their homepage or someplace pretty high up, are going to say that they support diversity, or diversity is an important, part of the institution,
right.
mission, so on and so forth. So we need to really tap into that and say, okay, well, what are the opportunities with regards to diversity? How can the library support that? I've worked at a couple institutions where they've said that. At Penn State, we do have a framework to foster diversity that's university-wide. And then the library also develops its framework and how it can support it. And we do that through the collections. You do that through the services. Even we think about the space, bringing in speakers. When you have sort of a diverse speaker series, why shouldn't the library be the place that highlights that? I think it would be interesting. One of the things that we do on our campuses is we have students who do study abroad. And, when those students come back, libraries can provide sort of a forum or speaker series or something where the students can share those experiences in which they've been enriched, where they probably were confronted with and had to deal with diversity in a way that maybe they didn't anticipate it. And I think sharing those experiences so that students do want to do programs or projects that take them outside of the country and around the world. I think that we could play a real role in sort of fostering that. I've worked at campuses within the Penn State system. Their students hadn't been outside of the county that the campus was in.
Yeah.
So for them to get on an airplane and go out of state, let alone out of the country, has been huge. And we have a lot of students for whom that experience of just going, from north to south or east to west is tremendous. And I think that we can do some things to support it.
So how do you take the framework, if your library, so the university has a framework to
Yes.
work under, then the library has its framework, how does that trickle down to your individual librarians and what they can do to help foster diversity? So, a lot of talking about diversity is very kind of broad. So how do you get down on the ground and to actually implement these sort of, this framework, these broad ideas?
Right.
Well, what are your individual librarians doing
to support
Yeah.
it. So obviously you have to have a familiarity with sort of what the framework is and what we're emphasizing. And so that's got to be important because
Right.
people may say, interpret something as being diversity and, maybe it's not
Right,
something that
right,
fits. So once you have an understanding of what fits into the framework, what kinds of things are important, then you're able to kind of look at it and see what kind of outreach am I doing maybe to student groups on campus, for example. Is there, should we be attending their monthly meetings? Are there sort of library opportunities in terms of our collections or services? Are we not? We know that there are students who are being recruited maybe from a particular region of the world, but we're not seeing them coming into the building. Is there some sort of outreach that we can do through student affairs to get those students to come in to the library, for example? Are there courses? There certainly are courses. All of our students have to take a course that's designated as a diversity course. There's sort of a U.S. Component one course, and then there's an international component course. Make sure that we're providing course-related instruction to those courses to further support the university's goals, and that every student who graduates has taken a course that fulfills those requirements. Those are a couple, I think, of sort of very sort of tangible, simple ways to do it, so that it just demonstrates that we're connected with and have an understanding of what's going on in the institution, and that it doesn't have to be sort of this big earth-shattering thing. I mean, you can take baby steps into making sure that, you do what you need to do, and that students, and for me to be sort of observing that, my staff member, for example, who does hiring of our work study students, has worked, I think, very hard to recruit a diverse pool of students. And so we have, we've, in the 5 years I've been there, the students we've hired have gotten more and more diverse, and it's really exciting. And I know that that's a point of emphasis for her. But then that also demonstrates to other students that, that they're welcome in the library as well. They'll come in to ask questions and actually use the building. So
It looks like a diverse place.
Yes.
So do you have sort of a diversity group in the library that is kind of focused on these outreach, or is it just kind of incorporated into everybody's day-to-day duties that, okay, yes, I have to think about diversity back here while I'm doing my regular job? Or is there sort of a special program or special group within the library that kind of focuses on diversity issues?
We do have a diversity committee, and
Okay,
they're the ones
great.
who sort
Okay,
of
good.
help with working on that framework and do the requests to get information to ask us, how are we developing our collections,
Great.
what
Okay,
programs,
good.
what, speakers, exhibits, that sort of thing do you have going on. But my hope is that from that, people are also doing that individual sort of, in terms of those hats, that they are thinking about diversity and the work that they're doing day to day. And some of it may be knowing that, in terms of our, our progress report, for the university, the Office for, Diversity and Equity has a sense of what we're doing, but hopefully then it just becomes part of what people do to make sure that, okay, we have, women in science and engineering who are doing their course, they're coming in the summer. We want to make sure that we're part of that. You've got McNair scholars, that you're just naturally, yes, we're going to partner with our colleagues and other libraries to make sure that they're getting what they need. So the goal is so that it just becomes a natural part of, no matter whether or not you're doing public services, technical services, special collections administration, that it's just a part of what you do. And then we have this great thing that helps us keep us on track, but also continues to change as the work we do changes over time.
Also, what question would you ask yourself if you were doing this interview?
What question would I would, that's a great question. What question would I ask myself? I think I would ask myself, how I think that I look different from most ALA presidents. I've come to this at a very different point in my career. What I speak to the pros and cons of having been ALA president at this point in time, and what advice I would give to others who maybe thought, I need to wait, who maybe want to say, maybe I'll go for it now. So now I guess I need to answer that question. It was a tremendous opportunity. I've been very fortunate that I've had great mentors both in my libraries and within ALA, because the nominating committee, they go through a real serious vetting process. And so to have been approached to run for ALA president, I really felt was a big deal and a huge honor. So I think that it was good and the right thing for me to do, to say yes, I would love to be considered to be ALA president. At the time that I did, were there things that I wish that I knew going into it? And I certainly had a lot of advice from a lot of people, and so it wasn't for not having enough information. But there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of work, and I'm glad to say that I met the challenge and was able to accomplish a lot.
Yes.
But there were certainly things that I wish I had a little more experience with or better understanding. But at the same time, I feel that I'm a good reference librarian at heart, and that those skills really served me well in getting up to speed and learning the things that I needed to learn. In terms of people who are thinking about, wanting to run for president, either of ALA or maybe one of its divisions or their state association, I always encourage people to go for it, because you can get to the point where you've had a 35, 40, 50-year career and decide you're going to do it, and there's still going to be so many things that you don't know.
Right.
So that sort of chronological piece isn't necessarily as important as people maybe thought that it was, but also recognizing that it's going to be a lot of work, and you're going to learn a lot of things, and you have to be open to doing that. So, but you don't go into it alone. You have I would not have been successful if it wasn't for all of my colleagues, both, where I work, but also within ALA, who really supported me to get through this, to help me, come up with ideas, who are willing to do the work and really move forward with the vision that I had for serving as president. So, you have to have a strong network of people who are behind you, no matter what, who really are there to support you, and also willing to put in the hard work that you're going to have to put in.
I think this notion of going for it is good advice, whether you're running for ALA president or going for a promotion,
Yes.
or moving to another job with more challenges, or deciding to write that journal article,
Yes.
whatever it happens to be. And go for it when you're ready. When you feel you're ready,
Yeah,
just go for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just
Stacey?
I'm just curious. It's kind of on top about being ALA president. So you met with so many individual librarians. Did you get feedback, criticism from the people on the ground saying ALA is too big? They can't help me in my, did you come across that at all? I don't know who, ALA is just this huge thing, and today I'm dealing with a budget cut, and
Right.
how can they help me? How
Right.
can they? Because sometimes it's really hard to navigate. I mean, I switched. I was a reference librarian for years and years and years, and I moved into technical services, and it took me 2 years, 3 years to try to figure out my new place in ALA and where to go, and so I'm just wondering if you sort of heard that from your people that you were talking to, and what your response was.
It was interesting because I anticipated that I was going to get a lot of this, and there were certainly times when I realized that, I am now one of them,
Right,
because
right.
of the role.
Right.
It's like, okay, yesterday before the election results, I was one of you. Then once it happened, I was one of them, which is
right,
okay. And I
right.
thought, okay, this is good. It gives me a good perspective. I didn't experience as much as that as I thought,
interesting.
because in a weird way, I think that people really saw my election and then service as sort of an opportunity, that people really thought, okay, well, maybe something different is going on here. I knew Courtney. I identify with Courtney in some way, shape, or form, and so, okay, maybe I can understand this a bit better. People were really actually very, very supportive and excited, and they were glad that, the thorny issues that we were dealing with, or working towards the new strategic plan, that I was involved in part of that process. People, I really felt, kind of thought, well, how does ALA fit into what I do? I think instead of sort of that, it doesn't, it's too much, people were like, well, there's a piece of ALA, and that piece, I guess, being me, that I know I'm connected to, so maybe it's not bad or big or wieldy, and certainly going to various conferences and state associations and saying, inviting people to the annual conference, in San Francisco, come sit, say come and hang out with 23,000 of your closest friends. That's how, it is. But it's still a challenge. It is still a major challenge for ALA. It's still, there's certainly are people who perceive it to, it is big. It's a big,
right,
complicated organization. Right. It is. But I'm hoping to move that dialogue to one where people can say, well, if Courtney, who was involved in this roundtable, and council can move some things forward and do things, well then, there's really hope for all of us. So I'm hoping to continue to work with the association to make it more obvious and apparent to people that everyone can be involved and that their membership does make a difference in the day-to-day work that librarians of all types do, and that it is focused on, its vision and mission and goals really do line up with mine, as someone, as you said, who's working in this small library doing this very sort of discrete kind of work. When you have 55,000 members, it's a balancing. It's a balancing act, and so I think if we can keep going back to the association's goals, we go back to the mission of the organization. That's something that people can see themselves in and can get on board with. We need to make it easier and more obvious for people to recognize, oh, this is why, being a member of ALA is valuable. This is why ALA is important. There are lots of people who are not members of ALA, but I think they appreciate, the advocacy work that the association does on behalf of libraries. I think they appreciated the letter that I sent on behalf of the association to the president saying that the next Librarian of Congress should be a librarian. I think that there are things that we do that people can appreciate. We need to do a better job of letting people know the things that we're doing on behalf of libraries, and that it's really connected to what they do on a day-to-day basis. It's a challenge because it's so big. We've been around for a long time. Change can come slowly, but I think that people really saw, this is being someone who can represent the association, me being so different, that people thought really, I think, feel, okay, maybe we're moving in a good direction. There's still going to be plenty of people who say, it's just too big, it's just too complicated, I have a hard time with it, but I want them, if anything, to be able to say, but at least to say I value the work that, the association does on behalf of all libraries.
Courtney, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure for us as well, and we're just glad that you're here at the Charleston Conference, and we hope that you'll be coming back.
I'm certainly looking forward to doing so.